There's a certain beauty in waking up at 70. The world feels slower, not because it's fading, but because it's finally breathing with you. You notice the sunlight resting on your hands, the rhythm of your breath, the quiet that no longer feels lonely, only alive. People often say, time takes things away. But maybe time is not the thief. Maybe time is the gentle teacher, patiently waiting for us to stop clinging to what has already passed. At 70, you realize something almost sacred. Life has never been about keeping things the same. It's been about learning how to let them go one moment at a time. This is wisdom quiet, a space where stillness becomes strength, where aging is not an ending but an awakening. If this journey speaks to you, take a deep breath. And before we begin, remember to like, subscribe, share, and leave your reflections in the comments below. Your voice, your experience, may become the light someone else needs today. Part 1: The Morning of 70. Awakening to the gift of time at 70. Mornings feel different. They are not rushed, not loud, not filled with plans or deadlines. They are simple, sacred even. There's a quiet that asks nothing of you, except to notice that you are still here. You lift the cup of tea, feel the warmth against your palm. Outside, the world hums slowly, not as a race, but as a gentle pulse. You've walked through storms, raised children, lost people, earned wrinkles that no cream can erase. And yet the morning light still chooses you. Most of your life, time felt like something to chase. Now it feels like something to receive. There's a subtle shift, from counting the days that remain to blessing the day that arrived. A woman named Elaine, from Vermont, once said in a letter to her daughter, "I used to wake up worrying about how many years I had left. Now I just wake up grateful that I get one more sunrise." Her letter became famous online, not because it was poetic, but because it was true. It touched something people forgot, that time is not measured in minutes but in awareness. You see, aging is not the opposite of youth. It's the deepening of perception. When you stop running after life, life starts to walk with you. Take a breath. Listen not with your ears, but with your years. Each breath says, you are still part of the story. Lesson: the gift of time is not found in having more of it, but in finally being awake enough to see it. And as we open our eyes to this quiet miracle of being here, a new question begins to whisper. If time is a gift, why do we still carry its weight like a burden? Part 2: The Hidden Weight of Time. How the mind turns years into burdens. At some point, we all begin to feel the weight of our own years. It's not the body that grows heavy. It's the stories we never put down. Some people carry time like a memory. Others carry it like a burden. At first, we believe the years themselves make us tired. The wrinkles, the slow mornings, the body that doesn't move as easily as before. But maybe it's not time that hurts us. Maybe it's how tightly we hold on to it. You see, the mind is a collector. It gathers moments, faces, regrets, every what if, every I should have, every loss we didn't know how to release. It keeps them in invisible boxes, stacked quietly in the corners of our hearts. And over the years, those boxes become heavy, not because of what's inside, but because we've forgotten how to set them down. There's a man named Thomas, a retired carpenter from Oregon. Every morning he goes into his garage, the same garage where he once built toys for his children. The shelves are still full. Unfinished projects, rusted tools, a rocking horse he promised to fix someday. He once told me, "I can't throw them away." They're my memories. But his eyes looked tired, not from age, but from carrying so much of what no longer lives. One day, Thomas decided to give away the toys. He kept just a single hammer, the one he'd used to build their first crib. Now, he makes birdhouses. He said, "At least now something new gets to rest inside what I build." And in that moment he looked lighter. Not younger, but freer. Close your eyes for a moment. Ask yourself, what do you still carry that no longer serves the heart? Which memories have turned from warmth into weight? Lesson: time itself is not the burden. It's the clinging that makes it heavy. The moment we learn to release, time stops being the enemy and becomes the teacher, a quiet companion guiding us home to peace. Because when the mind learns to set down the past, we begin to see aging was never the enemy. Fear was. Part 3. The illusion of knowing enough. When wisdom turns into walls, it starts quietly, not as arrogance, but as a sigh. A small thought that whispers, "I've seen enough." At 70, this illusion often arrives dressed as wisdom. We tell ourselves, "I already know how the world works." And slowly, without realizing it, curiosity, the lifeblood of the spirit, begins to fade. When the mind stops asking questions, wisdom doesn't grow deeper. It hardens, and what was once an open door becomes a wall. There's a man named Richard, a retired history teacher from Illinois. For 40 years, his classroom was his kingdom. Dates, names, empires, he knew them all. Even after retiring, he corrected everyone. His wife, his friends, even his granddaughter. One afternoon, his granddaughter tried to teach him how to use her tablet. Richard smiled and waved her away. "I don't need that. I already know enough." But later that night, he sat alone by the window, watching the world outside glowing with screens, laughter, and movement. And in that moment, a quiet sadness came. Not for what he didn't know, but for how long he had stopped learning. The next day, Richard asked his granddaughter to teach him again, slowly, this time. He fumbled, he forgot, he laughed, and something beautiful happened. He felt alive again. Learning, he realized, wasn't about mastering information. It was about staying awake to life. The Buddha once said, "In the beginner's mind there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind there are few. The mind that says I know closes its doors. The mind that says I'm still learning opens the universe." So take a slow breath. Notice what it feels like to not have all the answers. That feeling and that openness is humility, and humility is where wisdom breathes. What if wisdom isn't what you know, but how willing you are to keep learning? When was the last time you truly listened, not to reply but to understand? Lesson: knowledge fills the mind. Humility opens it. When we stop clinging to certainty, life becomes a teacher again. And in that laughter he found something rare, the joy of being a student again. He once thought wisdom made him strong. Now he knew the real strength was in remaining teachable. Because the greatest barrier to peace isn't ignorance, it's certainty. Part 4. The mirror of relationships. How love becomes attachment. Love, when it's young, burns bright, wild, full of promise. It feels endless, but as years unfold, something subtle changes. That same love, once light as breath, begins to feel heavy. You can almost sense it. When warmth turns into weight, it happens so quietly. What once was devotion becomes a need. What once was tenderness becomes fear. The fear of losing, of being alone, of not knowing who we are without the one we love. That's how love turns into attachment. And attachment, though born of love, begins to suffocate it. Her name is Evelyn, 72, from a small town in Maine. 10 years ago, her husband passed away. Yet every morning she still sets out his coffee cup, still keeps his slippers by the bed, still whispers, "Good morning, love." Her hands tremble slightly as she dusts his old chair. Not because she's fragile, but because letting go still feels like betrayal. One evening her granddaughter asked softly, "Grandma, why do you still keep all his things?" Evelyn smiled with tears caught in her voice. "I'm afraid if I put them away, he'll really be gone. Love is sacred." But the Buddha reminds us, clinging creates suffering. Even when what we cling to is beautiful, when we hold too tightly to what once was, we stop allowing what is to breathe. Attachment says, "Don't go." Love whispers, "Thank you for being." One morning as she watered the roses her husband once planted, she noticed something. Those flowers still bloomed, not because she held on to them, but because she continued to care for them. In that moment she understood. Love isn't kept alive through possession, but through presence, through kindness, through continuing to live fully. Think of someone you love deeply, a partner, a friend, a child. Do you hold them freely or through the fear of losing them? To love is to let life move through you, not to trap it. When love becomes attachment, it brings anxiety. When love becomes freedom, it brings peace. True love is not ownership and its presence. It's the quiet ability to say, "I'm grateful you exist even if you're no longer mine." That day she finally put away the slippers. But she kept the jacket, not on the hanger on her shoulders, and as sunlight warmed her back, she smiled. "He's still here," she whispered, "not in things, but in my kindness." Lesson: the Buddha called it metta, loving kindness. A love that asks for nothing, holds nothing, fears nothing. When you let go of attachment, you don't lose people. You find them again, everywhere, in everything. If these words touched your heart, take a breath and send love in silence to someone you miss. Because love, when freed, never leaves. It simply changes form, from holding to blessing. In our next reflection, we'll explore this same act of letting go, not in people, but in the spaces we live in. Because the clutter in our homes often mirrors the clutter in our hearts. Part 5. The Garden of Companionship. Choosing peaceful people. Every garden tells a story of what we plant, what we nurture, and what we allow to stay. And the same is true of our hearts. Every person we keep close is a seed. Some grow into comfort and joy. Others quietly tangle around our roots, stealing the light. In youth, we collect people the way we collect experiences, for company, excitement, or the hope of being seen. But as the years unfold, something inside us begins to crave a different kind of company. Not more people, just peaceful ones, because peace isn't found in the crowd. It's found in the company of those who don't disturb your silence. There's a man named Harold, 74, a retired mechanic who once lived for noise, music, engines, conversation. He met friends every week at the diner. Same jokes, same complaints, same arguments about politics. It all felt familiar, until one day it didn't. He drove home that night and turned off the radio. The silence felt heavier than the noise. She invites him for tea. No television, no chatter. Just the sound of boiling water and the soft clink of porcelain. They sit in silence. Harold fidgets with his cup, searching for words. "It's strange," he says. "I don't know what to say when it's this quiet." Lena smiles gently. "You don't have to say anything," she whispers. The tea is listening. For the first time in years, Harold breathes deeply. He feels his shoulders drop, the tightness in his chest ease. It isn't loneliness he's been feeling all these years. It's exhaustion. He hadn't been tired of people. He'd been tired of noise. After that day, Harold began to visit Lena often. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. They just sat and watching sparrows land on the fence, listening to the rhythm of their breathing. And slowly, he learned that silence isn't empty. It's full of presence. Take a slow breath with Harold. Notice how stillness can be alive. That's what real peace feels like. A quiet that nourishes, not isolates. Ask yourself, who brings calm into your life, not chaos? Who listens without fixing? Who speaks without wounding? Who leaves your heart lighter, not heavier? Choosing peaceful people is not rejection. It's alignment. It's saying, I choose those who remind me of who I truly am. Lesson. The Buddha once said, "An entire forest is known by the company of the trees that grow within it." And so it is with us. Our hearts become like the people we spend time with. Plant peace near peace, and kindness will bloom on its own. He looks at her and smiles. "This garden feels quieter than ever," he says. Lena replies, "That's because it's listening too." Peaceful company doesn't fill your life. It breathes with it. It doesn't demand your energy. It restores it. So if someone brings peace to your life, tell them today. And if these words reminded you of such a person, share this story with them as a quiet thank you for their presence in your garden. In our next reflection, we'll look within, because before we can choose peaceful people, we must first clear the clutter of the heart, the emotions and memories that keep peace from taking root. Part 6. The Cluttered Heart. Releasing Objects and Emotions. We spend our lives collecting things, stories, moments, faces. Each one once held meaning. Each one once made our hearts light up. But somewhere along the way, what was once precious becomes heavy. You can almost feel it, not in your hands but in your heart. Take a slow breath. Feel the quiet weight of everything you've kept. The letters in drawers, the photos stacked in boxes, the emotions you never said aloud. There's a woman I once met named Margaret. She lived alone in a small house by the sea, every shelf covered with relics of her past, porcelain cups, old postcards, her husband's fishing hat, long after he was gone. She said, "I can't throw them away. They remind me who I am." But her eyes carried the kind of weariness that comes not from age, but from holding too tightly. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled through the curtains, she picked up that old hat. Her fingers trembled between love and release. She whispered, "Thank you for what you gave me," and set it down gently in a box to give away. In that moment, she didn't just let go of a hat. She let go of the fear of forgetting. A single tear slid down, not from sadness but from relief. Because letting go of objects is never about the objects. It's about letting the heart breathe again. It's about allowing emotions, the grief, the guilt, the memories, to flow instead of fossilize. You see, clutter is not only physical, it's emotional too. We hold on to regret like old furniture, to grudges like dust in forgotten corners. They sit quietly until one day you wake up and realize your spirit has no space left to move. Take another slow breath. As you exhale, imagine releasing something small, a thought, a memory, a name you no longer need to carry. Notice how even a breath can make space inside you, Margaret told me later. Each time I let something go, I whispered thank you. And when her home grew emptier, for it wasn't emptiness she felt, it was lightness. She said, "I finally have room for today." That's the lesson. To release is not to forget. It's to honor what was and trust what's coming. Every time you clear space, on a shelf, in a thought, or in your heart, you invite peace to sit down. So look around your life. What do you keep that no longer serves you? What stories, what objects, what emotions are ready to be thanked and released? Take one slow inhale and one long exhale. Let it go, because every act of letting go is an act of compassion for yourself, for your heart, for your future. If this story reminded you of someone who keeps too much because they care too deeply, share this with love. In the next reflection, we'll explore something even subtler, the fear that hides behind all holding on, the fear of time. Part 7. The fear of aging, from denial to reverence. There comes a quiet moment in every life when the mirror no longer flatters but tells the truth. You pause and realize time has been walking beside you all along, not as an enemy, but as a silent teacher. One morning, I met an old man named Robert sitting on a park bench feeding pigeons. His breath fogged in the cold air. The birds fluttered, landing on his knees as if to comfort him. He smiled faintly and said, "When I turned 75, I stopped looking in mirrors. I couldn't stand watching time win." His words lingered like a sigh, because beneath them was something we all feel, that quiet ache of denial, the wish to pause the clock, to freeze ourselves at our best version. But as the Buddha taught, fear arises from clinging to what cannot be kept. We suffer not because time moves forward, but because we try to hold it still. Take a slow breath. Feel the years within you, not as weight, but as witness. Each one still whispering, "I was here." Robert showed me a photograph once. Him at 30, tall and strong. He laughed and said, "That man could carry anything." Then softer, "But he carried too much." He didn't realize back then that youth was not strength, attachment was. And now, as his body weakens, his spirit finally learns lightness. That's what aging asks of us. Not resistance, but release. Because aging is not a decline, it's a refining. Life slowly sands away everything that isn't essential, the vanity, the noise, the need to prove. What remains is pure awareness, tenderness, compassion. Picture a tree in autumn, its leaves turning gold. Some see death, but those who look closely see beauty at its ripest, the colors of completion, the fullness before surrender. That's what aging truly is, the autumn of being, luminous because it cannot last. Society teaches us to fight the mirror, to fear the number, but the Dharma teaches the opposite, to bow to impermanence, to see aging as the great teacher of truth. Everything that changes is sacred, because only through change can we see what never dies. Robert began to change too. Each morning, instead of turning away, he looked at his reflection and said, "This is the face that survived, the face that forgave, the face that learned." And in that small act, fear became reverence. So perhaps aging isn't something to resist, but something to bow before, a daily ceremony of gratitude. Every wrinkle, every ache, every silver hair, a verse in the scripture of your becoming. The question isn't how old you are, but how open your heart still is. When you stop fearing age, you stop aging in the way the world imagines. Your body may slow, but your spirit becomes luminous. The heart that no longer clings begins to shine. Take one more breath. Inhale, honoring the years behind. Exhale, welcoming the years ahead. Every breath is proof that the story isn't ending. It's deepening. If these words touched you, share them with someone who still hides from their years, and remind them, growing older is not the loss of beauty, but its unfolding. In the next reflection, we'll explore another quiet illusion, the belief that and what true freedom begins when that illusion fades. Part 8. The Expectation Trap. When happiness depends on others, there's a quiet heartbreak that never screams. It hides behind kindness, behind the smile that says, "I'm fine." It's the pain of waiting for someone else to make us whole. It begins early in life, like a song we never stop humming. If they love me, I'll be okay. If they stay, I'll be happy. If they change, I'll finally rest. But every time we hand our peace to another person, we lose a small piece of ourselves. Take a slow breath. Feel how much of your peace has been waiting for someone's permission. I once met a woman named Ellen. She was 72, soft-spoken, gentle, the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthdays, but never her own needs. When her husband passed, the house grew quiet, too quiet. The clock still ticked, but the air felt heavy, like the room itself had forgotten how to breathe. Her friends visited. They called. They cared. Yet one day she told me, I still feel invisible, as if my life only exists when someone notices it. Those words, "My life only exists when someone notices it," carried a truth most of us live with silently. We measure our worth not by our own heartbeat, but by the echo of others. Take another breath. Feel the space between who you are and who you think you need to be loved. Ellen's healing began with something simple. She started walking by the lake alone. At first, she said it felt strange, like showing up to life without a companion. But slowly she began to see the ripples of water shimmering like laughter, the scent of rain resting on leaves, the peace that blooms when silence isn't emptiness, but presence. It felt, she said, smiling, like life was keeping me company. That's when she stopped asking others to fill her cup. She realized the cup had never been empty, only covered by expectations. It isn't love that hurts us. It's the expectation that love must look a certain way. The Buddha taught, attachment is not love. It is the desire to control what we cannot. And expectations are just another form of control, a quiet way of saying, be what I need, so I don't have to change. Take a breath again. Let the air remind you. Belonging was never something to earn. When we stop waiting for others to behave a certain way so that we can finally be happy, peace returns home. Their behavior is their karma. Our peace is ours. Ellen didn't stop loving people. She simply learned to love without needing. And that is freedom. Every time you say, I'll be happy when they pause, that's the moment your peace is walking out the door. Call it back. Whisper, I can be happy now. Because happiness built on others will always tremble. But happiness built on awareness stands still. And in that stillness, love becomes pure again, like sunlight through an open window, asking nothing, shining on everything. If these words met you where you needed them, pass them forward, not as advice, but as kindness. You never know who might need the reminder that peace was never lost, only misplaced. In our next reflection, we'll face another hidden habit of the mind, how comparison quietly steals our peace, and how true freedom begins when we stop measuring our light by someone else's shadow. Part 9. The Comparison Mirage. The Thief of Inner Peace. There is a quiet poison that seeps into even the gentlest minds, comparison. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It hides behind admiration, behind curiosity, behind that small, tired thought, why not me? It begins so early. As children, we watch who runs faster, who gets praised, and we start believing that worth must be earned through measurement. But what begins as a game becomes a cage. We spend a lifetime looking sideways, counting what others have, forgetting what is already ours. Take a slow breath. Notice how the mind compares us even now. It's not your fault. It's just what the ego does when it forgets it's already enough. I once met a man named Harold. He was 78, a retired carpenter. He'd built houses for decades, his hands steady even as his back curved with time. One afternoon, while watching his neighbor's new home being constructed, sleek, modern, perfect, he sighed, I wish I had built something that lasted longer than wood. But his granddaughter, sitting beside him, looked confused. She pointed to the rocking chair he had made when she was born, still creaking gently in the corner. That one lasted, she said. And in her small voice, something inside him softened, because the truth struck him like sunlight through dust. He had built something that lasted. Not a monument of stone, but a memory of care. A life measured not in square feet, but in moments of kindness. Comparison blinds us to our quiet contributions. It convinces us that peace exists only where perfection is. But perfection is an illusion. a mirage shimmering just far enough away to keep us chasing. The Buddha said, "Peace comes when the eyes no longer wander." When you stop looking outward, you begin to see inward, and what you find there is enough. Take another breath. Feel your shoulders lower, your chest soften. You don't have to compete with anyone for peace. It was never a race, Harold told me later. When I stopped comparing, I started noticing. The smell of cedar in his hands, the warmth of tea in the morning, the laughter of his granddaughter. None of these moments were big, but they were real. And reality in its simplicity is where peace hides. Because comparison is always about absence. Gratitude is always about presence. When you compare, you live in what's missing. When you are grateful, you live in what's here. Let's pause. Breathe slowly in and out. As you exhale, imagine releasing the need to measure. Feel what remains when the scoreboard disappears. It's not emptiness, it's freedom. You become like the sky, still spacious and untouched by passing clouds. Here's the lesson. The mind that compares is the mind that forgets its own wholeness. Peace doesn't come from being better. It comes from being true. And truth has no rival. So when you catch yourself thinking they're happier, pause. Ask gently, what beauty in my own life have I stopped seeing? Because the thief of peace is never out there. It lives in the moment we stop appreciating this breath, this morning light, this very heartbeat. If these words reminded you to look inward, share them with someone who measures too much and smiles too little. Sometimes a quiet story can return a person to themselves. In our next reflection, we'll meet another shadow of the past, the chain of regret, and discover how forgiveness untangles even the oldest knots of the heart. Part 10, The Chain of Regret. Learning without self-punishment. There's a sound the heart makes when it remembers too long, a quiet ache that doesn't hurt loud, but heavy. Regret. It doesn't live in the past. It lives in our chest. Every if only, every I should have, every why didn't I becomes a small link in the chain we drag through our days. We think that regret is proof of conscience, that by punishing ourselves, we're somehow making things right. But the truth is, regret doesn't redeem the past. It only steals the present. Take a slow breath. Notice what regret feels like, not as guilt but as weight. And ask softly, what am I still carrying that no longer teaches me anything? I once met a man named Thomas, 80 years old, with kind eyes and trembling hands. He spent decades replaying a single decision. When he was young, he refused to visit his father before he passed, too angry, too proud. For years afterward, he said the same words to anyone who would listen. I can't forgive myself. When I met him, he said it again. His voice cracked like old wood. I can't forgive myself, so I asked, what would forgiveness change now? He paused, looked down and said, maybe it would let me love the rest of my life, that was it. The door opened. Forgiveness doesn't change the story. It changes the storyteller. It loosens the chain that keeps the heart bound to what cannot be undone. Thomas began a small ritual. Each morning he'd sit by his window with a cup of tea, place his hand over his heart and whisper, I was younger then. I knew less, but I was trying, and every morning the chain grew lighter. He wasn't erasing the past, and he was transforming it, turning shame into understanding, turning punishment into practice, turning regret into reverence. The Buddha once said, you can search the whole universe for someone more deserving of your love than yourself, and you will not find them. Regret blinds us to that truth. It makes us believe we are exceptions to compassion, but we're not. Take another breath. Feel how it is to sit beside your own mistakes. Not to fix them, not to flee, but simply to stay and understand. That staying is love. That understanding is wisdom, because life doesn't ask for perfection, it asks for presence. And presence can't grow where self-punishment lives. Thomas told me once, I finally realized the past doesn't need me anymore. He smiled when he said it, a smile that felt like sunrise breaking through years of grey. That's the gift of release, not forgetting, but remembering differently. When you forgive yourself, you don't erase who you were. You finally make peace with who you've become. Here's the reflection. Regret is just memory without compassion. Add compassion back in, and the same memory becomes wisdom. Take one last slow breath. Whisper gently to your heart, it's okay, you were learning. And with that breath, let another link of the chain fall away. If this part touched a memory you've carried for too long, share it gently. Maybe someone else is ready to forgive too. In our next reflection, we'll face another subtle illusion, the belief that time itself is an enemy, and how, when we stop fighting it, we begin to see aging as grace unfolding. Part 11. The Lie of Too Late. Why awakening has no age. There's a lie that sneaks quietly into the heart as the years grow long. It doesn't shout. It whispers, it's too late to change, too late to start over, too late to heal, to forgive, to begin again. It's a voice that sounds reasonable, almost kind. It says, you've already lived most of your life. Just accept what is, but what it really means is stop growing, and that is the cruelest lie of all. Take a slow breath. Feel how that lie has lived inside you, maybe not as words but as a quiet resignation, a gentle giving up. I once met a woman named Clara. She was 83 and had just started painting. Not as a hobby, but as a calling. She told me she'd always wanted to paint when she was young, but her father had said, that's not practical. So she became a teacher, then a mother, then a widow. And somewhere along the way she forgot that color once made her soul dance. One day she saw a watercolor set in a store window. She stood there for a long time, then walked in and bought it. I felt silly, she laughed, like a child pretending to be an artist. But that night she painted until dawn. Her hands shook, the colors bled, but her heart remembered. By morning she was crying, not from sadness but from recognition. I realized I hadn't been too late, she said. I'd just been waiting until I was ready to listen. That's the secret of awakening. It doesn't follow time. It follows sincerity. Growth doesn't ask, how old are you? It asks, are you willing? The Buddha didn't measure awakening by age or by years of practice, only by the depth of seeing. And sometimes the oldest eyes see the clearest, because they've wept enough to wash away illusion. Take another breath. Notice the years that sit behind you, like pages in a book you've already read. You don't have to rewrite them, you just have to keep reading, until the light changes what the story means. Because awakening doesn't erase your past, it redeems it. Every mistake, every loss, every detour, each becomes a doorway to compassion once you stop calling it too late. Clara's story didn't end with painting. She began hosting small art classes for other seniors, people who said the same words she once did. I'm too old to start. She'd smile and answer, if you can still breathe, you can still begin. And in those quiet rooms filled with laughter, trembling hands and color, she created something far greater than art, a community of rebirth. Here's the reflection. It's too late is never true. It's just the mind's way of avoiding the beauty of beginning again. You are not running out of time. You are running out of reasons not to live fully. Take one more breath. Inhale possibility, exhale hesitation, and whisper to yourself, I'm still here. That's enough to start. If you know someone who thinks their time has passed, share this with them. Maybe your words will be the light they needed to see that life still calls. In our final reflection, we'll step into the harvest of it all. What it truly means to age as awakening in slow motion, and to find freedom not in years left, but in presence found. Part 12. The Harvest of Freedom. aging as enlightenment in slow motion at last. You reach the quiet season of life, a time not of endings but of ripening. For 70 years, the world asked you to move, to build, to become. Now for the first time it whispers, just be. There is no longer anything to prove, no mountain left to climb, no competition, no comparison, no unfinished race. You have arrived, not somewhere outside of yourself, but here in this breath, in this moment, that asks nothing but your presence. Think of a field after harvest. The crops have been gathered, the soil rests, the air holds a golden stillness. This is not barrenness, it is peace, because only when the work is done can the land finally breathe again. Aging is like that. For so long you have carried the weight of ambition, of duty, of expectation. But now, each wrinkle on your face, each slow step, each silver strand of hair is not a sign of loss. It is a testament of living. Every mark says, I stayed, I learned, I loved. I am still here. The world taught you to chase youth, but the Dharma teaches something far gentler, that freedom ripens slowly. That wisdom blooms only after countless seasons of falling and rising again. Sit with that truth for a moment. The sound of your breath, the pulse of your heart, these are the mantras of existence itself. You don't need to seek enlightenment somewhere distant. You are already walking it, one mindful step at a time. Remember, the Buddha said, by letting go, it all gets done. Not through force, not through striving, but through surrender, the sacred art of release. So now close your eyes for a moment. Imagine yourself standing in a vast golden field. The wind brushes your skin. The sky is wide, endless, forgiving. In your hands are the fruits of all your years, memories, joys, sorrows, lessons. And as the sun lowers, you gently open your palms. The fruits fall into the earth, returning to the soil that gave them life. You feel lighter, clearer, freer. The cycle is complete. The harvest has come home. You are no longer chasing peace. You are peace. You are no longer seeking light. You are light, soft, quiet, eternal. This is the harvest of freedom. Not the end of the story, but the beginning of a deeper one. The one where time itself bows to awareness, and every breath becomes a prayer of gratitude. From all of us at Wisdom Quiet, thank you for walking this path with us, Katen, for breathing, reflecting and remembering what truly matters. If this journey has touched your heart, share it with someone who needs light today. And if your own light still flickers, know this, it is enough. You are enough until the next dawn of wisdom. Breathe gently, live lightly, and let the quiet guide you home.